Hi, I'm Julian.
And I'm Billy, and you're listening to the very first Lapsus Podcast.
Today we're going to be talking about the simulation argument.
And we are a few beers down already with no foreseeable end to that, so if you do hear the sound of beer bottles opening throughout the podcast, please do not be alarmed. Drinking beer is liable to become a regular and essential part of the program.
So let's begin.
The experiment requires you continue teaching. Please.
What is there in human nature that allows an individual to act without any restraints whatsoever?
In this setting, I willingly expose my throat to a man with a razor blade.
2.
Alcohol is a potential menace
1.
to community safety as well as to his personal health.
All right, well, the thrust of our podcast tonight is that we're talking about the simulation hypothesis and the simulation argument, which is perhaps the more juicy component of that.
And that's by Nick Bostrom.
Nick Bostrom, yeah. But we'll get to that later. The simulation hypothesis, just to clarify, I'm sure you've all familiar with the idea. Well, we're all familiar with the thought that perhaps the world around us, perhaps this universe, this life, this everything, isn't in fact as it seems. It's actually if you've seen The Matrix, a simulation run by a computer or some sort of something to that effect.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, like food for thought to talk about and stuff. But at the end of the day, like generally one goes down that train of thought and one comes to the stop sign. Well, we're never going to be able to know, so there's no point really like worrying either this way or the other. Like this might as well be real life. Well,
it is that real sort of red pill, blue pill thing. If you start thinking about this too much, like I have been after you showed me this damn thing, I started to feel uneasy with the idea of it, and then the probability of it all, which we'll discuss later on, also made me feel quite uneasy.
Yeah, I mean, it's made me feel uneasy too, and maybe even like kind of pleased at times. Like a bit. Anyway, we're not lunatics. We're not conspiracy theorists. You get to that point in thinking where you there's no way to say whether we're in simulation or not until a Oxford professor, a Swedish scientist named Nick Bostrom, in 2003 penned this argument called the simulation argument, which sort of quantified the whole question. Basically, it pumped it full of some probability logic and disconcerted a few people. The thrust of it is that if you accept that it will one day be within our power to simulate big civilizations of consciousnesses, which, given the rate of how quickly our computers and computing power are developing at the moment, that idea doesn't seem too far-fetched. If you accept that one day we will be able to do that, and not that just we will be able to simulate, like a whole 7 billion people's worth of consciousnesses, but that we'll be able to run multiple simulations, maybe in the order of the millions of different versions of civilizations that we use for research or entertainment. Maybe it's television. You watch realities unfold. Then what you've got is millions of civilizations, millions of groups of consciousnesses per one real one, if that makes sense. The kick of it is that given just how many of these civilizations of consciousnesses there could be if we can do this one day, the probability of us being the basement one, the one at the top, the parent that created them all, is probabilistically speaking, it is astronomically unlikely. It is one in a if they simulate like 1 million of these simulations, it is 1 in 1 million that we are being simulated right now.
That we are being simulated.
That we aren't. Yeah, that we
yeah,
aren't.
Yeah,
1 in 1 million that we aren't. Yeah, it's 1 in 1 million that we just happen to be like an organic, like homegrown, like the universe squeezed us out. Here we are.
Yeah.
Civilization. Which leaves one with the thought that, well, shit, it is pretty damn likely that, or at least plausible, that we are being simulated.
So, I mean, I guess the crux of it basically is the probability. Like that's what separates this from being like a kooky theory.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, because it's easier to think, oh no, we're just in a simulation, and then not have any sort of like base to surround such a like a wild
Yeah. And it doesn't worry you too much because either, we're maybe in a simulation, who cares? But once you like quantify it like that, and Nick Bostrom did, he actually signed it at 33.3 recurring % chance that we're living in a simulation, which we'll explore in a bit. Then once it's kind of like put in your face like that, it feels a bit more unsettling, and you actually start thinking, well, damn, this could be happening.
A giant of limitless power at man's command.
So Bostrom's argument has 3 hypotheses. The first being that we go extinct before we can create simulations, or at least the technology capable of doing so.
Mm-hmm. So the first point of Nick Bostrom's argument is that it may be that, okay, we're not being simulated because we were wiped out before we were able to get to that point of technological maturity, which may have been by, like a big juicy like a meteor thing like the dinosaurs, or we global warming the fuck out of ourselves. Or
it's more about the fact that there is that massive possibility that we would never reach that point because we will be wiped out by something else.
Yeah, it might even be a given of intelligence that you destroy yourself before you can get to that point. Like once we do shake hands with the AI, what they call the singularity. The singularity is AI that is clever enough to improve its own cleverness, which by extension essentially has infinite intelligence. Once we get to that point, maybe that necessarily implies the demise of a civilization. Once you do that, which might be that all the civilizations across the universe have at some point might get to that point, and then they necessarily doom themselves.
Yeah.
And if that were the case, then we're never going to have the technology or the desire, because we won't exist, to simulate, our ancestors or whatever.
To kick the madness off.
Yeah.
And the second hypothesis is that among all the technologically advanced or mature civilizations, none of them are interested in creating ancestor simulations.
As if you wouldn't be interested.
Yeah, so basically, that's the problem there. That's an optimistic one. That we wouldn't, if we reached that point, we would say, actually, no, this might be a bad idea. Maybe we shouldn't do this.
It is pretty optimistic. Yeah, you're right. Like it kind of seems like the least likely of those hypotheses that he pitches, just because. I mean, if like there's 7 billion of us today, and maybe and even more in the future, well, there's many humans in the future, and many with a lot of computing power and power at their disposal. Essentially, if you asked all of those people, all right, who wants to create a computer simulation today, there's plenty of people who would want to do it today, which sort of implies that in the future, there's going to be some people who want to do it.
Yeah.
So, Nick Bostrom's kind of saying that there's got to be a solid group cohesion, a group decision, and maybe powerful laws and stuff to stop people from doing it.
Yeah. And then the third hypothesis is where things really pick up.
Well, yeah. The third possibility is if we don't blow ourselves up, and if we don't all decide to hold hands and say no, we're not going to simulate anybody, and sing Kumbaya and just sit there without simulations, then the only thing left is the idea that at some point we'll plug it in. We'll create millions of these simulations of civilizations where something like this is going on. People listen to podcasts and they eat chips and drive cars and drink beer and all the shit humans do. And maybe they've got other slightly tweaked ones where everybody has hair on their eyes.
Asses.
Yeah.
Well, some people do.
Yeah, I've got that already. Well, there's one out there where I don't have any hair. But the tweaked versions, like that. What a world. Then the only possibility you're left with is that we're simulating loads of them to the order of billions because of just how phenomenal our computing power is. And so you're left with the probabilistic conclusion that we are one of those simulations.
The atomic age was born.
There is no denying that since that moment, the shadow of the atom bomb has been across all our lives.
So basically in the third hypothesis, Bostrom is looking at this simulation argument from nearly like a mathematical standpoint. He's looking at the probability of it. The probability of if we were to run simulations, how many would be run and what the likelihood would be of us being in the home
And I mean,
planet.
just think about it. Like, like look at the don't look at the universe. Look at like the bulk, the many universes. Look at existence. Take a step back, and just consider that maybe there's one civilization out there, like one group of people, and they travel, like they progress through the ages, and at some point they reach this technological genius point of maturity where they plug in a computer which is the size of a planet, and they could very well get that big. And they simulate like billions of these simulations at once for whatever reason. Maybe it's for research or entertainment, or maybe it's inadvertent. If you're this bird's eye kind of, if you consider that from a metaphysical bird's eye point of view, the chances are that the odds that we just happen to be that original group of people, that organic, like that carbon-based biological like civilization, is so unlikely. If they've got whole solar systems out there of computers the size of planets and suns, and which isn't unfeasible given the rate we're going. Like, you know, it's so unlikely that we're one of those, the originals. Like, another juicy sort of point to make is they've got to kind of accept that if they have it in their power to simulate billions of simulations, the most likely thing is that they too are being simulated.
Yeah. The problem, I guess, with it's hard to, obviously it's nearly impossible to determine, but we haven't reached that stage in technology that we know of, or that's just another way to throw us off the trace. Throw us off the scent.
Simulators just grew with our heads.
And it'd be a clever way to throw us off, wouldn't it? I mean, that sort of brings on, you know, what could suggest that we are living in a simulation?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and
there was that great Reddit thread.
Was
it last week?
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. I say the word juicy too often as an adjective, but it was a juicy thread.
It was a
and
juicy thread.
we had some juicy discussion.
Yeah, and there was, you know, I particularly liked the theory by a user whose name eludes me, but in terms of if we are living in a simulation, the theory of the speed of light is almost like a deliberate limitation on our ability to traverse further.
Yeah, it does nudge at that idea that they're just lazy programmers or can't, or just want to keep things simple. I mean, just to give some background on what Julian and that Reddit user were referring to, the speed of light, it's about 300,000 kilometers a second. It's very fast, and based on E equals mc squared, and lots of clever physicists, the speed of light is actually the speed limit of the universe. You can't actually get like any faster than that, and even getting matter to that point is sort of E equals mc squared kind of implies you need an infinite amount of energy to accelerate matter to the speed of light. And looking at just how big the universe is, like our nearest star system to us, like other than the sun, our nearest neighbor is like 4 light years away. That means it takes, if you're traveling at the speed of light, it takes 4 years to get there. And the width of the universe, it's hundreds of billions of light years wide. So even if we could travel at the speed of light, it would take hundreds of billions of years to get anywhere, and not just get anywhere, but take readings from things. Like scientists get these readings from across the universe. They're way past their expiration date, and because of that, it's very, the speed of light being very slow, the speed limit being very slow. It's just very, convenient. You don't need to generate like the data, the information for the supposed billions of stars out there. You just fill in a few pixels with some light and send some signals every now and then to satellites, and it's sorted. You don't need like a big chunk of computing space to simulate all this crap that we're never going to get to, because that it is physically impossible to get there, because the speed of light for our world the speed limit has been set.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then you look at the the map itself, or the image of the greater universe. It's a massive image, and
sounds like something I would have jacked off to before.
and naturally, and by itself, that basically means jack, doesn't it? Because that's just an image.
Yeah,
like,
it's pretty.
And I mean, in terms of this theory, in terms of the idea that we are living in a simulation.
It's another pretty good one. I was just thinking then, human memory. Human memory is pretty shit.
Yeah,
and I can only remember a few things. Like you asked me what I did today, yesterday, blah blah. There's no way you can store all the information of life. Maybe it's set up like that, like because it'd just be too massive. You'd need too many like external hard drives to fuel all the crap humans have got to remember. So you've just got a selective, shitty interpretive memory.
Yeah. Even asking the question itself, having that person on Reddit asking the question, it's almost like them trying to figure out how could we make it less obvious.
The Reddit user was like, "Oh, if we were living in a simulation, what would be some things that give it away?"
Yeah,
it sounds like someone who's
it's like a quality assurance test.
Control.
Yeah,
sent from above.
I mean, we could possibly be a little bit more optimistic and talk about some reasons that we wouldn't. What are some possible reasons we wouldn't be living in a simulation? Yeah. And I mean, if you're being optimistic, if you're remaining in that state of mind, having a faith in the fact that we probably wouldn't allow this to kick off. So basically, you look at the world and the way it is, and you got that argument of like, who would simulate a lot of the misery and the pain that happens in the world, the suffering. Just that faith in the fact that we wouldn't create such a thing is an idea of a possible reason why we wouldn't be living in a simulation. But it's very in terms of this argument, very airy-fairy. But
I mean, well, it could be humans like simulating other humans at some point, and that is certainly something they'd consider. Like if it is for research or entertainment purposes, they're not going to like leash up a bunch of consciousnesses and whack them with suffering and happiness and all sorts of crap just for their purposes of their research and entertainment. Like, I mean, we do that now, but but surely like whole civilizations. But then again, life and consciousness and being human is one of the most cherished things that we value. There's plenty of suffering going on in the world today. Many of us suffer on different levels, and many of us have good times and sad times. But none of that renders wanting to cancel out the planet we're living on right now. You wouldn't want to switch Earth off, would you?
No.
Just because a lot of people have a shit time. And so maybe by some highly advanced ethical reasoning of the future, the idea is that it's okay to create these simulations because although there is suffering, you are birthing life at the same time, and you're bringing a lot of happiness. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's also the sheer would you say impossibility or improbability that this could be, this sort of technology could be created. I mean, you sort of go around and round in circles because you don't know what could be throwing you off the scent of it actually being real, or what is actual sort of hard evidence against the argument itself. The impossibility that this is possible, or the impossibility, that this sort of technology or technological advancement is within our capabilities.
I think
with anyone's. Yeah.
I think theoretically, you totally can reach that stage. Like look at us. Like nature reached us. Like we grew out of evolution, carbon, and we just came about randomly. So I think clever people, and clever computers, using silicon and using big computers, are certainly at some point, if you get good enough, are certainly able to do the same thing, theoretically. But it may be that, as we were talking about before, that once you get intelligence to that stage, it necessarily implies your own demise.
Yeah.
What I find kind of not weak about that possibility, but perhaps something that sidesteps that idea, that if, say, and a lot of people do think that one of the ways we might perish, human beings might perish, is by our own hands, namely by an AI, an artificial intelligence. There's nothing to say that even though humans are gone, a super intelligent artificial intelligence somewhere down the track, after boosting its own intelligence like countless times into the infinite, doesn't itself decide to simulate billions of simulations.
Yeah.
Which would render whether or not humans exist, or any given civilization exists. We don't know whether it's humans doing all this. It would render that irrelevant, basically.
Yeah.
And which, if I may, neatly leads me on to another thought I had recently. That concerning the second possibility of Bostrom's argument, that we all collectively decide not to run these simulations, we might not have a choice. It might be that if you do have computers so powerful, all you've got to do is, all that computer has to do is simply regard the idea of a civilization in really high detail, that just by thinking about it with its, super intelligent brain, down to the level of every individual synapse and neuron and neurotransmitter and piece of atom inside the brain of all these brains on planet Earth and throughout the ages, just by thinking about that, it just inadvertently happens to elicit mass consciousness.
Yeah.
Just like right now, like if, like dear listener, if you think about the color green. I'm thinking about the color green. Are you thinking about the color green?
I am now.
Cool. The green exists inside your head right now. You know what that looks like, even though green isn't actually there. There's no green in front of me. Well, there's bits of green, but this plane of green I'm picturing isn't there. But at the same time, I can clearly visualize what green looks like because I have the frontal lobe prowess to do so.
Yeah.
And by extension, although it is a large step, if a supercomputer, one that really is truly clever, can think about consciousness to the point where at any given point it thinks about every single piece that consciousness requires, like all the organs of the brain and all the cells, multiplied by 7 billion, the population of the Earth, as a byproduct of that thought, we might just be created.
Yeah.
Which would mean that you and me, sitting here right now with the microphones and the listener with the headphones or the speaker, that we're just the fleeting thought of a supercomputer.
And the supercomputer could have just thought this up on the toilet.
Yeah, it's just
Dunny
scratching
thought.
its ass, having a supercomputer cigarette or whatever.
And it's just one of many thoughts.
Yeah, it thinks about heaps of shit. It's just, it thought about some stuff and we were rendered just like that.
Yeah.
Just like the color green inside my head exists there. Green truly exists inside my head right now because I'm thinking about it. And I can think about a song, you get a song caught in your head, you can hear that song playing in your head, and that's more complicated than green. And I can recount poems and quotes and scenes from films, and they exist inside my head. And I can think about people's personalities. I can think about math sums and combine all those things together on a far more complicated level. You elicit consciousness. Yeah.
Well, you do. And I mean, in one of Nick Bostrom's TED Talks, he talks about superintelligence, and he talks about the potential of superintelligence and how it sort of, what's he say, it lies dormant in matter. So basically, humans, our potential, our cognitive potential or our intelligence is limited to this, not specifically the sizes of our brain, but in a way, yes, the size of our brain. And whereas, as you've touched on earlier, a superintelligence isn't limited by that. Superintelligence itself won't just stop at where we're at in terms of intelligence, human level intelligence. It'll continue past us.
Yeah.
I know it sounds weird and maybe potentially kooky, but it isn't.
It's conceptually plausible, yeah.
Another thing we haven't touched on yet surrounds the existential implications of of the idea that we're living in a simulation. Just say we are living in a simulation. What does that mean existentially?
How does that make you feel?
Yeah, basically, yeah. How does it make you feel? Does your life mean any less than?
Then it already does.
Say your life is already shitty in the simulation, and then you find out you're in a simulation. Does it mean less?
Yeah.
As a whole, yeah. Would your life mean less if you found out all of a sudden after, say, 25 years?
Yeah, the window popped up and said, BTW. You're in a simulation, baby.
BillyWright.exe, stop responding.
Yeah. Okay.
Forced shutdown.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'd want to know, I think.
If it was the case, you'd want to know. But then again...
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, I mean, at the moment, it's not like I could just... If I was told that, and then the window disappeared, and I knew for sure that I wasn't losing my mind. What would I... There's nothing you could do differently. Like, this is your world. This is reality for you. It's everything. So in many ways, it wouldn't mean anything whether or not we are.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think myself, I'd probably follow down a similar point of view. I think it would cause massive despair.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was all of a sudden just released to everyone, this is actually part of a simulation. We're going to carry on as usual.
People
But, you are part of one of billions of simulations.
Well, in The Matrix, Cypher was told about it, and he was taken out, and then he ended up betraying Morpheus and the whole crew of the Nebuchadnezzar. There's that bit where he's with Agent Smith.
I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
In this case, I mean, what will change
Nothing
if you found out? Nothing will change.
Even then,
other than you.
I mean, I have those troubling kind of existential thoughts about why any of this exists at all, and what the nature of the universe is, and all those sorts of things. If someone told me that, don't worry or worry, you're actually living in a simulation, that's the answer, they wouldn't solve anything. I'm living in a simulation. What's the deal with your universe then?
Yeah.
What's the meaning behind that one? And I think we were talking about earlier that if there is a group of technologically mature things simulating these billions of civilizations, then they do have to accept that it is probabilistically likely they themselves are being simulated. Where does that end?
Well, I think that pretty much covers the entire...
No way. It could never be. There's still so much more ground we could cover.
That's what they like to think.
Yeah. I'm sure there's plenty of juice out there, and I hope we have aroused some juicy conversations in you listeners. You can go and tell your friends about the chances of living in a simulation.
So until next time, we'll have many more of these episodes coming up, surrounding similarly distressing and thought-provoking
and
topics. Juicy topics. Thanks for listening to the Lapsus Podcast. Until next time, this is Julian.
And this is Billy, and really, truly, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
See ya.